Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard. This video initially was going to talk about Tulsi Gabbard supporting Ellen in her support of war criminals. Essentially, hug your own war criminal. Aloha. It's the way we mend America. That's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard in my life. I greatly disliked Tulsi backing Ellen on this. We don't bring the country together by essentially supporting people who are mass killers. Bush is responsible for more deaths than anybody you can think of over the last 30, 40 years. And not just deaths of Iraqis, but also deaths of her brothers in arms. Deaths of Americans. Not to mention those wars. We've been drone bombing those countries for the last, 18 years. Tulsi Gabbard was over there because of Bush. Torture, the breaking, ripping apart of human beings, that is not something we should normalize, nor is it something we should rehabilitate. And when Ellen is criticized for such, she should be criticized for such. George Bush should have been dragged before the Hague. If George Bush was part of some kind of podunk African country and killed a tenth of the number of people he was responsible for killing, they would have hung George Bush at the steps of the Hague. My video was going to deal with that subject until Tulsi Gabbard released another video. And that video I agree with. Kind of. Tulsi Gabbard drops a bombshell on the DNC in a clip that is 1 minute and 40 seconds long. And ultimately, her basic point is they cheated Bernie Sanders in 2016, which was right there by itself. I was like, whoa, where is she going with this? And then she goes further to make the argument that in the way that they rigged the election against Sanders in 2016, they're rigging it again against other contestants in the race. And I am considering boycotting the fourth Democratic debate to draw attention to this. That was my mic dropping. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, like it, find yourself coming back often, please like, share, subscribe. Of course, you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you in a literal sense because YouTube demonetizes these videos willy-nilly at this point. Tulsi Gabbard. Me criticizing Tulsi Gabbard doesn't necessarily mean I still don't consider her my sword. Ultimately, I want her on the debate stage. I want her pushing Sanders to the left. I want her creating a space on the left. So when one of those neocons says something that is off kilter, that is out of line with my ideological framing, I would like somebody on that stage to be my sword to push back on that particular point. She did it with, what's his name, Ryan? And yeah, ended Kamala Harris's political aspirations for president. But this one is interesting. I'm going to let Tulsi Gabbard explain her point. And I want to talk about it after Gabbard explains her point. Fascinating. Interesting. And I don't think it's entirely what it is, even though she's making a good point. Let's hear her out.
I want to thank all of you so much for your support. I need to share something with you that's very important. There are so many of you who I've had the opportunity to meet in Iowa and New Hampshire who've expressed to me how frustrated you are that the DNC and the corporate media are essentially trying to usurp your role as voters in choosing who our Democratic nominee will be. I share your concerns, and I'm sure that all of our supporters throughout the country do as well. Now, the 2016 Democratic primary election was rigged by the DNC and their partners in the corporate media against Bernie Sanders. In this 2020 election, the DNC and the corporate media are rigging the election again, but this time it's against the American people in the early voting states of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. They're attempting to replace the roles of voters in the early states using polling and other arbitrary methods, which
Just to be clear, She's right about the cheating Sanders. However, whatever extent you want to go, I can stand here and I can read Donna Brazil's testament to such. It is impossible to read what Donna Brazil wrote and explain in the way that the DNC was working under Hillary Clinton, essentially having it on giving an allowance, and come away from that saying, yeah, that was an entirely fair and impartial process. Gabbard is absolutely right. There's another reason she's bringing up 2016. The reason that Tom Perez is having all of these debates. If you remember, Tom Perez made the argument that it wasn't cheating, it was the appearance of cheating. It wasn't that we were rigging it, it was the appearance that it was being rigged. So what was Tom Perez's solution? Well, I mean, we only had 2 debates, and part of the reason that people were pissed off is because we had so few debates. So let's have 1,000 debates. And then you have this other issue of you have 20 Democrats. How do you deal with the 20 Democrats? Well, Tom Perez is going to have 1,000 debates because his issue was an appearance of impropriety. He wants to make sure that with all of these debates, it's a fair process. Problem. It wasn't an appearance of impropriety. It was actual impropriety. They were actually cheating. People didn't think they were being cheated. They knew they were being cheated. Your party made the argument that you can choose a candidate in a smoke-filled room in defense of fraud. Because what people said was, this wasn't an impartial process. And if I'm sending my money to win Bernie Sanders, and the process is not fair and impartial, despite you telling me that the process is fair and impartial, then you, for all intents and purposes, committed fraud. I sent you money also under false pretense. The fix was in. And so me sending money to somebody who I thought was participating in a contest was somewhat of a moot point. Fix was in. Tulsi is right. Sanders was being cheated. This whole 20 debates and all. And here's the other part. The DNC has decided that it's going to have specific polls. So somebody like Gabbard, who should have been in a 3rd debate, because by any measure, by any honest measure, some of the polls that the DNC was using, there were other polls out there that was just as good as the ones that the DNC were using that were showing a surge, or at the very least movement, from the standpoint of Tulsi. She had the people, meaning the number of individual donors, and she had the support if you were taking an honest, fair looking at polls. Maybe not the specific polls of the DNC, and even the polls that the DNC were okay with, they weren't coming out in sufficient measure to get across this notion of a potential movement. And the fact that Tulsi ends up on the debate stage in the 4th debate, despite not being in the 3rd debate, gets across that she should have been in the 3rd debate. But now she's talking about potentially, and I'll let her say it. Go ahead, Tulsi.
Which are not transparent or democratic, and they're holding so-called debates attempting to replace the roles of voters in the early states using polling and other arbitrary methods, which are not transparent or democratic, and they're holding so-called debates which really are not debates at all, but rather commercialized reality television meant to entertain rather than to inform or enlighten. So in short, the DNC and the corporate media are trying to hijack the entire election process. So in order to bring attention to this serious threat to our democracy and to ensure that your voice is heard, I'm seriously considering boycotting the next debate on October 15th. I'm going to announce my decision within the next few days. But I just want to say with my deepest and warmest aloha, thank you all again.
Tulsi Gabbard dropped several bombshells in that video that is honestly, in part, the reason why I like her. So, one, for all of her supporters that thinks this is apolitical, it is not, I'm sorry. And people have a tendency to believe that she's doing things that is entirely apolitical, that is not apolitical at all. Tulsi has a point. It's one thing if the DNC said, look, we're going to go by polls that are approved that meet certain standards. Because you may have all sorts of polls that are out there. You only really care that they're meeting a certain level of standard where you can use an evaluation, but that's not necessarily what is taking place. She's also making the point that these things are arbitrary. They are arbitrary. It's not transparent. And the DNC is continuously changing the rule set in regards to trying to thin the herd. Meaning, you end up with somewhat of a practical problem, right? You have 20 people. How do you deal with the 20 people who are running in the election? And do you just allow them to go until they can't go anymore? Meaning until it just kind of thins the herd out on his own volition as it goes from stage to stage to stage to stage. That's one way to do it. The DNC chose to go the other route and says to artificially thin the herd by saying, look, you have to meet these requirements in an ever increasingly difficult standard. And so it's very possible that the fifth debate, Tulsi may not make it. Meaning it's possible that she may not be able to garner the support, whatever the standard that the DNC makes. And in not being able to garner the support for whatever the DNC makes, meaning she may get the individual contributions, but she may not make the polling thing. Or she may get the polling thing, may not get the individual contributions. Whichever one it is, her point is, look, this is somewhat of an arbitrary tightening of the race of sorts. To be fair to her, she is showing what seems to be momentum. The catch is the DNC going to allow that momentum to be expressed in somewhat of a natural way for it to either go up or go down as the election perpetuates itself? Or are they going to try to artificially exclude various candidates from the race that may have some level of potential if you allow the race to continue without necessarily artificially constraining it? Her point is, it's not transparent, it's not democratic, and ultimately it seems to be arbitrary. And using this notion of what is a sore rail in the standpoint of the Democratic Party, you cheated Sanders. You rigged the race with Sanders. And to make the point crystal clear, you're now doing it again. That's brutal. I'm curious to see what happens on this. That is brutal. I'm shocked that she said that. Pop reality. Brilliant way for Tulsi to rehash the DNC cheating Bernie. Yes, Fox News should eat this up, especially with impeachment hovering near Fox leaders. Yes, and how the mainstream media is grooming Americans to warn undoubtedly helps Bernie. Pop, yes, that's fascinating, right? Like Fox News should have ran this as like, and Tulsi Gabbard brings up the cheating of Bernie Sanders and then reads Donna Brazil's note because, you know, Donna Brazil now works at Fox. Yeah, Pop, I agree with you. That's amazing. That's amazing. Funny. I am shocked. I'm curious to see what's the response on this. But yeah, I like it. And yeah, it is a good way to call back to, you guys cheated Sanders and now you're trying to rig it again. And making this point of, you guys are like, she's trying to put her thumb in their eye to kind of bring this up. The catch here is, though, if they tighten the race in the fifth round, she may not be a part of that debate. So the only way that she can really make a stand is in this debate. So what does she do? She makes a stand in this very specific debate. Honestly, I don't want her to boycott the debate. I want Tulsi on the debate stage. I want her on the debate stage. Everyone is lying to you. So Trash Can is going to boycott the debate, not going on stage and make the point to millions of voters. I said this 100 times. She's trash. You're being a hypocrite with her stance on Medicare for all. How am I being a hypocrite? No, I'm not being a hypocrite at all. What I said was, you're not getting my vote if you're not supporting Medicare for all. Tulsi Gabbard is not supporting Medicare for all. However, Tulsi Gabbard is my sword on issues of foreign policy. That hasn't changed. That has never changed. Bernie Sanders is my candidate. He's the horse to which I ride. That has never changed. You must understand, to me, candidates are like pieces on a chessboard. Tulsi Gabbard is a bishop. When she goes on Fox News and she argues against the neocon point, I cheer her. When she goes on, CNN and she tells Jake Tapper that we're army terrorists and we need to stop arming terrorists, I cheer her. When she goes out and she supports Ellen, I bash her. When she says she's doing single hair choice or whatever, I call it something like Lone Ranger and Tonto, at making the point that if it's a Lone Ranger, why is there a Tonto? Meaning, how can you have a Lone Ranger and then have a second person with it? Medicare for all is my litmus test. It's never changed. Pop reality, but let's be clear, it's also a badass way to drop out. It is a badass way to drop out, but I don't think she's dropping out. Like, Tulsi does seem to have gotten a momentum in some of these polls. In some of these places, she's polling higher than Kamala Harris. So, you know, it's like, why would she drop out in this situation? And yeah, I think she does somewhat have a point. If she's showing a certain degree of momentum, you may feel some kind of way if you feel that the DNC is unnaturally stopping your momentum. Like they're putting up, it's like you're showing movement in the polling. And the DNC says, yeah, let's stop that. Artificially, just blink. She would feel some kind of way. And from her campaign standpoint, I can totally understand her looking at this and saying, the DNC is stopping me from going into the race. I have all of these supporters who are giving me cash, who are giving me money, who are giving me support, who are out there working and pushing for Tulsi. You can see them on Twitter all the time, fighting hard for Tulsi. And you stop them unnaturally, as opposed to letting this go to its natural volition. That's her point. It's an unnatural way of stopping a political process as opposed to letting the political process play out. It's not so much that I think Tulsi is quote-unquote fighting for democracy. I do think them cheating Sanders is a usurping of democracy, full stop. And her making the point that you guys are doing it again in this kind of unnatural way. It's not the exact same thing in the way that they cheated Sanders, but it is, to some degree, you can make an argument, a certain degree of rigging the process. Even though rigging sounds a little bit strong, it is curtailing the process in a way that is somewhat unnatural. She's not wrong. She's not wrong. What other attack do you have? I've been having people throwing Sanders in my face as if this stuff is some kind of real argument. It's not. It's not. Marcus Will. So we're not in Syria for the Kurds, agreed. So why are we in southern Syria? There are no Kurds there. Why? Who are we protecting now? Trump has stated directly we're there for Israel. Yes, he has. 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 We're in somebody else's country for Israel. Isn't that amazing? Spider77, Bernie needs to stand up to debate moderators' biased attacks the way he did when he was on Fox. Well, he had. I mean, if you remember when he said this is a Fox News attack or something like that, this is a right-wing framing of an attack in drug commercials, that was him literally going after the moderators of those debates. I don't think that's false. I still say Bernie Tulsi. That's just it. I don't dislike Tulsi. I don't dislike her. I disagree with her supporters sometimes because they seem to back her regardless of what she does or what she says. That's fucked up, Bob. Sanders probably needs a fresh diaper messing with his gravy train. That's fucked up. That's fucked up, Bob. If you vote Trump, make sure it's about getting rid of the Me Too movement. What? What? That's random. Trudy, and he said that's a right-wing phrasing of the question. Yeah, Trudy, he did. He pushed back. He did push back. What I do hope is that the truce is over. Any notion of a truce with Warren should be over. That should be, like the aping of Sanders has been an extremely successful tactic. Essentially to be the cuddlier version of Sanders that won't challenge the system. And if I'm being honest, probably going to be somewhat dishonest in regards to her tack back to the right in the general. So I don't, it's a political stunt, pure and simple, blackface. That's true. But it's been somewhat of a successful one. Truce needs to be over. And if I'm being honest, maybe the truce should have been over with earlier. Because allowing her to instantiate in people's minds that these guys are somehow a one-to-one is a problem. And she's now gone, with this notion of, okay, now I'm not going to take money in the general. Okay. Again, aping of Sanders. If he would have hit her on that early on, she wouldn't have been able to attack back on that particular issue in the way that she has. But I understand it. You're in the debates. And for the most part, the moderators are asking you questions that she is assisting you in defending. And it becomes somewhat of a difficult thing to hit the person who's essentially in your foxhole. Biden is toast. Warren is your opponent. Go after her. Vet her. Don't be unfair, but vet her. Elizabeth Warren is the new Rachel Dolezal. Actually, Jake Morgan, Elizabeth Warren was the first Rachel Dolezal. Elizabeth Warren was first. She was pretending to be a Native American long before Rachel Dolezal came along. So, I'm going to end this here. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll be back within maybe 20 minutes. Just long enough to get the next show up. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon.